to give public testimony at each item on the agenda. We'll allow 2 minutes of public comment. Should you want to comment or give any testimony on each item of the agenda. With that, I will hand it off to Carrie Marsh to read the first item on the agenda, please.
This is a vote to execute a taking of property at Sharon Woods in Hyde Park and a vote to grant a conservation restriction to the Southwest Boston Community Development Corporation.
Thanks, Carrie. So with that, we're going to pass it off to Kathy Baker Eclipse from the department, who will give a brief presentation on the Dale Street acquisition.
Kathy, you're muted.
Almost had all the pieces right. Thanks for having me. My name is Kathy Baker Eclipse. I'm the director of the capital plan for Boston Parks. I'm here to talk about the eminent domain acquisition of the Sharon Woods addition at 0 Dale Street in Roslindale. This site is just over 1 acre and is located at the end of Dale Street at the corner of Metropolitan Avenue. It is currently owned by Linda Van Dam and is adjacent to the MBTA commuter rail and the Amtrak line on the east, Wider Park, which is a park owned by DCR, to the west, and Sharon Woods Urban Wild on the southwest corner of the site. The site plan that you're looking at is oriented north is to the right, so just for orientation. This site is heavily wooded and appears to have never been developed. It is within a city block that is otherwise undeveloped and is over 95% wooded. There is an existing Boston Water and Sewer easement on the east side, and it is adjacent to the pedestrian overpass connecting Hyde Park and Roslindale, which increases access across both neighborhoods. The site was identified in Boston Parks' parcel priority plan as a site that has open space value. The community has advocated for this site to be preserved and protected as open space for many years through many administrations. This site is heavily wooded. Once it is incorporated into the city's property inventory, it will be subject to the Boston Tree Ordinance. The trees that are on it will have a level of protection that will contribute to our larger efforts to sustain and support the tree canopy that benefits all residents of Boston. The site also has high stormwater capacity due to its proximity to the existing hydrologic features within Sharon Woods, and it is highly likely that it shares some of those features as well. We'll understand more as we begin exploring, understanding the existing conditions, and really diving into the details of the site. As you can see in the image, a significant portion of the site is within Zone A, which is establishing that there is a 1% chance annually of flooding on a portion of that site. We performed an environmental site assessment as part of our due diligence before finalizing our decision to move forward with this acquisition. There were no major issues. There is some minor dumping, which is common on undeveloped sites like this. Also, part of our due diligence was to have an expert appraiser give us their estimate of what a fair market value would be. They determined that the highest possible fair market value was $510,000. We are offering that to the current owner, and that funding is from the open space acquisition funding from the Community Preservation Act. The site will have a conservation restriction placed upon it as required by the CPA statute. We are working with the Southwest Boston Community Development Corporation to be the CR holder for this site. The routine maintenance for the site will be undertaken by the Urban Wilds team as part of their land management plan for the adjacent Sharon Woods site. As we get more information about the site and dig into the potentials for expanding some of the trails from Sharon Woods into this site, we may apply for CPA funding for a capital renovation. CPA has previously funded some entry work as part of the Sharon Woods Phase 2. So it's a site that they are familiar with, and these images that you're seeing are part of that work that CPA previously funded at Sharon Woods. So that is really it. That's the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners have.
Thank you, Kathy. I can at least say I know from the year and a half plus time that the team's been working on this, this is really exciting to potentially add this into, you know, our portfolio to expand open space at this site. And very grateful for the support of Southwest Boston CDC that has been on this journey as well and has agreed to help with holding conservation restrictions as required by the CPA. So really a community effort on this. Yeah, so I don't have any comments other than I'm really excited about the potential acquisition of this property to our portfolio. Anything from other commissioners?
I would just echo your comments that I think it's wonderful that we're able to add this parcel to the Sharon Woods Conservation Area, and I'm very excited about it.
I'm equally excited by the opportunity to acquire more property. Kathy, I am curious though, what was the basis for the $510,000 appraised value? What was the identified highest and best use?
I'm not sure what the highest misuse was, but I think they looked at potential. I think they looked at 3. I don't know if Aldo can unmute himself and he could answer that. He is much more familiar with the details of each appraisal report.
I can't.
No, you're good, Aldo. We can hear
okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so the highest and best use given the existing zoning, which is it's a conservation protection subdistrict. The at that point, the plan for Roslindale was done by the BRA, and per the community sentiment, they designated it as a conservation protection subdistrict. And in fact, the plan recommended that it be acquired by a public agency for open space protection. However, since it was a private property, you know, by law, you cannot zone for no development. And so it was zoned in the most restrictive development category, which is conservation protection subdistrict. And as a 1 acre parcel, you can, hold on a sec. Okay. You can, with a 1 acre parcel, you can create 3 dwelling units there. Yeah, and it's a very oddly shaped parcel. It has a long, narrow panhandle, and the Boston Water and Sewer easement restricts about 1/3 of the property size. Restricts 1/3 of the property size. So it would push development toward the urban wild rather than toward the tracks. And of course, there's a lot of people in Hyde Park and Roslindale know living near their tracks is not exactly the most enjoyable experience. But in any case, so we did, 3 unit, per acre was seen as the highest and best use, and used comparables that were similar to that type of development framework.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Aldo. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So any other comments or questions, I should say, from the commissioners?
No question. Just want to reiterate what others have said and support this project. I know there's been a lot of community activism around the area, starting with Sharon Woods. So this will be a nice addition adjacent to Sharon Woods. So thumbs up for this project.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. Does the property line between this new parcel and Sharon Woods, does that essentially become dissolved and this absorbed into the larger Sharon Woods property? And is there a conservation restriction on the existing Sharon Woods property? Just curious. And it sounds like no downside to this acquisition from my perspective.
Thank you. In practice, the property line would be dissolved between the the Sharon Woods 1 and 2 and this Sharon Woods addition. Sharon Woods currently is made up of several parcels, 1 and 2. And it is treated and managed as one continuous open space. So the thought is that we would be able to bring some possibly new trails into the site, possibly have a new entrance on Dale Street right at the bottom of the pedestrian overpass. So in practice, it would be managed as one continuous site.
Kathy, this is Carrie. If you don't mind, the reason, Commissioner Bollinger, that the conservation restriction will be put on
Oh,
this
yes.
parcel is because the funding will come from the Community Preservation Act, which requires conservation restrictions on land that uses that funding. The existing Sharon Woods, I can't speak to whether it has a conservation restriction, but it's owned by the City of Boston Parks Department, so it would not necessarily need one otherwise.
Correct.
Thank
I
you.
apologize for forgetting that question.
No worries. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Seeing none. Liza, as Chief Landscape Architect, do you have any comments on this project?
No comments. Thank you.
Great. Now I'd like to open it for public testimony on the Dale Street acquisition. If any members of the public want to raise their hand or virtual hand, you'll be let in to comment on the potential acquisition of 0 Dale Street.
Commissioner, I see a hand.
Yep, go for it. Thanks, Pat Alvarez.
Okay, Colombo had her hand raised as well, but I'll just say I work for the Southwest Boston CDC. We were asked to hold the conservation restriction. We're very familiar with that role. We've also been working in that woodland for 16 years. We run a youth jobs program that does conservation restoration under the direction of the Parks Department. So we are thrilled that this is now going to become part of Sharon Woods, and we will be able to take care of it. I just think it was such a wonderful decision, and I thank the city so much. And Beth can tell you a lot, I'm sure, about the years of advocacy efforts that the community has taken to make this, to bring this to the forefront. So I don't know, Beth, are you there?
Yep, we'll take it from there, Pat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, and Beth Colombo, Luke, if you could mute.
Hi, good morning. I am so thrilled that this is going through. This has been an effort for over 20 years for the neighborhood. I run the Dale Street Crime Watch / Neighborhood Association. We had a big advocacy with this, especially with the last development that was trying to be put through there. And we're just thrilled that the city is actually doing this. This is something that I never thought I was going to see in my lifetime, because I'm getting up there in age now. And to actually have this finally come through to be the last fitting piece puzzle to the Sharon Woods is something that we're all thrilled with. And we just want to thank Mayor Menino, Mayor Walsh, and Mayor Wu for working on this with us. And of course, the commission. And that's all I have to say. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks for all your advocacy over the years.
Thank you.
In addition, the commission also received 4 letters on this proposal, one from Joanne Dubois from Southwest Boston CDC, one from Rep Consalvo, one from Councilor Enrique Pepin, and one from the Dale Street Neighborhood Association, as Beth mentioned. So in addition to the public comment, all 4 of those were shared in our Google folder with our commissioners. So they also got those letters. I'm not seeing any other public comment on the Dale Street. No other hands raised. With that, I'll take it back to the commissioners. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Great. A second?
Second.
I'll second. Okay.
Perfect. Seconded by Commissioner Quealy. And you're going to have to bear with me on this one because this is another long one for legal purposes that have to be read verbatim here. So please bear with me on this. There is a vote to execute an order of taking dated July 29th, 2024 to acquire the fee simple interest inclusive of trees and structures standing upon and affixed thereto of a parcel containing 44,137 square feet, more or less, of land, now or formerly owned by Alfred Thomas Van Dam Jr., aka Fred Van Dam, which land is located at Unencumbered, aka 0 Dale Street in High Park, District of City of Boston, numbered in the records of the Assessing Department as parcel 1-808-198-000, and formerly the property of the former Boston and Providence Railroad Corporation, further bounded and described according to a plan of survey made by Henry R. Feldman Incorporated Civil Engineers and Land Surveyors, Joseph L. Calabro Jr., Registered Land Surveyor number 15998, dated January 18th, 1993, and recorded at the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds, Plan Book 24453 on page 302. Said land to be used for the community preservation purposes of providing a park, passive recreation, national resource conservation, and added public access to the urban wild known as Sharon Woods. And to further vote that the supposed owner be awarded a sum of money set against their name as compensation for damages in their estate at 0 Dale Street in the High Park District of the City of Boston by the taking of their interest in the land for the community preservation purposes of providing a park, passive recreation, natural resource conservation, and added public space to the urban wild known as Sharon Woods, and to further vote that said park be known as Sharon Woods Addition. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Very exciting on Dale Street. There is a second vote. Kathy, I don't know if you want to introduce it, but pretty much just on the as CPA requires a conservation restriction being held by a nonprofit. Is there anything else, Kathy, you want to add?
I think it will be held by the Southwest Boston Community Development Corporation, who is, like Pat mentioned, is familiar with it. They are the CR holders for the Sprague Pond project, which we acquired last year. So it's a process that should be pretty smooth once we roll into it. So.
Thank you. Again, I want to thank the Southwest Boston CDC for their willingness to hold this restriction. Are there any other comments by the commissioners on the CPA CR holding? Seeing none, is there any public testimony on the conservation restriction holding at Dale Street by Southwest Boston CDC? I am not seeing any hands raised. Oh, Pat Alvarez. Pat?
I want to just reiterate that, as you said, we've already been working with the Parks Department and the city archaeologist at Sprague Pond, Lakeside. So we're very familiar with the process and how it works, and we're very committed to doing the same for Dale Street. We do a lot. We've been working in there for, as I said, years. So we're very familiar with the site, and we have a close relationship with the Parks Department. So it would be our honor and pleasure to be able to hold the CR.
Thank you very much. With that, any other public testimony on the CR holding for Dale Street? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. There's a motion by Commissioner Birdseye. A second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Bollinger. All in favor? Well, sorry, I got to read it again before the all in favor. Another long one, so bear with me. This is a vote that the Parks and Recreation Commission, on behalf of the City of Boston, for the community preservation purposes of providing a park, passive recreation, natural resource conservation, and added public access to the urban wild known as Sharon Woods, having taken by eminent domain the following described parcel of land with funding from the Community Preservation Fund appropriated for the acquisition of open space and parkland by the City Council, hereby grants a perpetual conservation restriction in said parcel of land to the Southwest Boston Community Development Corporation in accordance with Section 3 of Chapter 185 of the Acts of 1875, GL Chapter 44B, Section 12A, and GL Chapter 184, Sections 31 and 33, having found this grant to be in the public interest, and authorizes the Commissioner of the Parks and Recreation Department to enter into all agreements and documents and to execute any and all instruments as may be necessary to effect said perpetual conservation restriction. Locus, the parcel of land known as Sharon Woods Addition, formerly the property of the former Boston and Providence Railroad Corporation, further bounded and described according to a plan of survey made by Harry R. Feldman Incorporated Civil Engineers and Land Surveyors, Joseph L. Calabro Jr., Registered Land Surveyor number 15998, dated January 18th, 1993, and recorded at the Suffolk County Registry of Deeds, Plan Book 24453, page 302. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you again to the Southwest Boston CDC, and congratulations to the community in High Park for the successful acquisition of 0 Dale Street, now the Sharon Woods addition. Congratulations. With that, Madam Secretary, would you please introduce the next item on the agenda, please?
This is a vote to approve the conceptual design and demolition management plan for White Stadium as proposed by Boston Public Schools and Boston Unity Soccer Partners, which is sited at 450 Walnut Avenue on assessing parcel number 1203486001, which is separate from and surrounded by Franklin Park, which is located in the neighborhoods of Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Jamaica Plain.
Thank you, Carrie. Just to frame this a little bit for a second before we go on the presentation, this is seeking conceptual approval for the renovation / replacement of White Stadium, which includes demolition phase work. So this is not a typical project. It is completely surrounded by parkland, even though the parcel itself is Boston Public Schools property. So while Parks Commission review is typically the last step in a project review, we didn't want to wait until the final design before we bring it to the Parks Commission where things were already set in stone. So today's review will focus on the conceptual design and the early phase demo work. A larger review will focus on the final design when all those final plans and construction drawings are in place. So this, again, is seeking conceptual approval of the renovation and demo work, and a later review will be for formal approval on the final design. The other approvals this has been through, landmarks on June 25th, there was a conceptual design approval, which included demolition of the existing stadium with ongoing design review and subcommittee. It went before the BPDA board approval vote on July 18th. It came to the Parks Commission earlier this winter, and then came back in June to show the concepts and the changes that have made based on public comment and feedback, and is in front of us today for the conceptual design and demo management on 7/29, with another date, likely in the fall, if this passes today, for a final vote on further design. So we've also gotten some other comments that we've received related to other projects in adjacent areas of Franklin Park. So this review is only for the project at White Stadium. There are currently no active plans for new buildings within the park, whether it be animal shelter or ambulance stations that have been mentioned. They've been put on hold to evaluate other options. And the Shattuck Hospital, of course, is state land. So we're not sure where that stands yet, but this focus will be on the White Stadium conceptual and demo planned with that. So with that, I want to intro Eliza Meyer from the Parks Department to give some more context, who's worked, as you all know, on the Franklin Park action plan for a number of years and has been engaged to make sure goals are being met throughout the process. And we're keeping the Franklin Park action plan, as our steering wheel here throughout the process. So Liza.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner. Before the proponent gives their presentation, I want to take a minute to talk through some of the work happening in parallel with the design process for the stadium. So all of this work that I'll outline here is ongoing, and the Parks Department is closely involved in these efforts alongside a number of other city departments. There are several agreements between Boston Unity Soccer Partners and the city that govern the terms of, or will govern the terms of use of the stadium. So these will include a lease agreement, a stadium use agreement, and there will be a BPDA cooperation agreement. Through these agreements, important management and operations terms like public access hours, scheduling and permitting, cleanup and landscape maintenance, noise, lights, and other considerations will all be codified. The BPDA cooperation agreement also provides an outline of the overall mitigation and community benefits associated with the project. The Transportation Access Plan Agreement, or TAPA, will codify the specifics of the Boston Unity Game Day Transportation Plan, including neighborhood traffic and parking considerations, park entrance and access impacts, and parking lot management within the park. Park traffic and parking planning will consider all of the park users. So that includes Franklin Park Zoo, the golf course, and general park visitors. So there are also ongoing city meetings focused on transportation and parking for non-Boston Unity events at or around White Stadium. So this includes major BPS sporting events, major cross-country events, and major park events. And then lastly, I want to note that there are some additional ongoing efforts as part of our review that, again, probably may not be part of the presentation today, but are important for understanding the overall context of this project. The city is working in coordination with the zoo to advance their parking and operations considerations. We're working with BPS around parking and events management. We're working on relocation of recreational or sporting activities during construction. We are meeting with the Franklin Park Coalition regularly and looking at formalizing a shared governance structure with the coalition. And we'll be working on the formation of a White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Committee as described in the cooperation agreement for ongoing oversight and coordination around events and activities at White Stadium. So hopefully that provides some helpful sort of management and operations context as you review these design plans. And I'll turn it back over now to the commissioner.
Thank you, Liza. With that, we will turn it over to the proponents for a presentation. Just ask that anyone presenting, please state your name loud and for the record so it can be codified in the court reporter's notes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Good morning. We want to thank you, Parks Commissioners, for hearing our presentation today on the rehabilitation of White Stadium. We're eager to hear your valuable feedback. My name is Sam Valentine, and I'm Senior Landscape Architect with the Planning Department, until recently known as the BPDA. I'm also a certified arborist, and I've been working on this project as a co-project manager for several months. I'll be facilitating today's presentation, and now I'll pass the mic to Chief Dion Irish and Jennifer Epstein to provide introductory remarks.
Thanks, Sam. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dion Irish. As the Chief of Operations for the city who has watched this project unfold over the past 2 years, I'm excited to share with you plans for revitalizing White Stadium, a cherished community landmark. Today, we are seeking your approval on the updated conceptual designs and review of the park impacts associated with the demolition phase of the project. I'd like to thank the Parks Department staff because they have led us to a design that protects our parkland and opens up access to the community. We are especially grateful to Liza, Ryan, and Kathy's leadership, and as Commissioner Wood said earlier, for using the Franklin Park Action Plan as the steering wheel. Our goal is for White Stadium to be more than a facility. We envision it as a hub for athletic excellence, community gatherings, and cultural events. I'll stop now, and I'd like to pass it over to Jennifer Epstein, the controlling partner of the Boston Unity Soccer Partnership.
Thank you, Dion, and thank you for having me here today, Commissioners. My name is Jennifer Epstein, and I'm the lead owner of Boston Unity Soccer Partners. When we envisioned bringing Boston its newest professional sports team, we focused on how our team could impact the city beyond 20 game days a year. We intentionally selected White Stadium as our home pitch because of the year-round generational benefits this collaboration can bring to our community, culminating in a renovated White Stadium that integrates with the broader Franklin Park landscape and provides programming and amenities that improve the park experience for everyone. We are excited to share with you a refined vision that has been shaped by extensive collaboration with the city, BPS, and the community to accomplish these important shared goals. Thank you for the opportunity to present that collective vision. And with that, I'll now hand the mic back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Jennifer and Dion. Here you can see our agenda for today's presentation, and we've organized it around the questions we've previously heard from both Parks commissioners and staff. Dion?
Thanks again. So next slide. We'll start by returning to where we began and the purpose of the renovation and the community process that we've engaged in. Next slide. So we've had an extensive engagement process that provided us with feedback that will continue to strengthen our plans for the design and the programming of White Stadium. This slide lists some of the various small groups and community and public meetings that we've hosted since January, that we've been meeting with the community since last summer, and prior to that meeting with BPS student athletes and athletic department. Next slide, please. The renovated White Stadium will offer high quality indoor and outdoor amenities requested by students, coaches, and the athletics department. For decades, administrations have tried but never succeeded in finding the right combination of partnership and funding that prioritizes community needs. The Boston Unity Soccer Partners will invest capital, provide rent, maintain renovations, make community benefits, setting a new standard for sports facilities in Boston. These community commitments will be legally codified, as was mentioned before, to ensure long-term accountability. Next slide. Previously, BPS practices would have to be canceled when it rained in the Playstead, and also events in the park would be canceled based on field conditions. So we weren't able to provide year-round programming. Now we will. Next slide. Here is a sample White Stadium schedule during the Boston Unity game week, where 90% of the operating hours are dedicated to BPS and community. The stadium will extend its hours from 8 hours to 15 hours, with public restrooms, water fountains available to the public, and much requested community amenities. The final programming will be reviewed by a neighborhood council.
Dion, based on guidance from the Parks Department, this rehabilitation project looked to a key document, the Franklin Park Action Plan, to ensure that the new stadium respects and complements the surrounding park. This report was developed over more than 3 years of community engagement and released in late 2022. It suggests connecting and activating edges, improving movement and wayfinding, amplifying community drawing or magnet destinations, and unifying environmental standards across Franklin Park. To make these improvements possible, Mayor Wu committed to increasing staff and resources across the park, including the hiring of 6 new maintenance staff dedicated exclusively to Franklin Park. And now Chris Bridle from the Boston Unity team will continue.
Thanks, Sam, and hello, commissioners. My name is Chris Bridle. I'm a landscape architecture principal at Stantec. We'll be presenting with Tamara Roy, an architecture principal at Stantec. To keep this presentation concise, we'll be presenting our work on the west side and the work of Jones Architecture and Crowley Cottrell Landscape Architects on the east side. Our teams have been working together to ensure we create a holistic design. After meeting with the landscape architects who authored the action plan and planning department staff, the East and West design teams put forth a consensus plan, consolidating the massing into a single form that preserves the critical heritage trees and rock outcroppings, reducing paving and opening up to the south of the stadium to the Playstead. Next. One of the defining elements for both design teams are the majestic existing trees surrounding the stadium. We have prioritized the preservation of the legacy and heritage trees identified in the Franklin Park Action Plan, and we're also planting a new diverse selection of trees for a healthier, more biodiverse park. We are removing invasives and trees in poor health to preserve more valuable trees and help restore original views. Next. These diagrams illustrate our tree planting approach. The image on the left represents the original tree planting arrangements with informal groupings framing the Playstead. We aim to preserve and restore this original intent, opening up views that were obscured and overgrown following these diagrams from the Franklin Park Action Plan. Next. Here we detail the where and why behind our tree removal and preservation. The trees being removed are either located along stadium walls and fences, are invasive species, or are in poor condition. The lighter green groupings around the stadium represent the original trees being preserved, and we will be proposing new trees that will further enhance the Playstead's pastoral quality. We want to make clear that this project, for both tree protection and tree removals, complies with the city's new tree protection ordinance. We are reintroducing a naturalistic planting approach around the stadium. The image on the left shows the pastoral composition of specimen trees in combination with varied species and groupings. The images on the right demonstrate this original Olmsted intent in Franklin Park. This plan synthesizes these tree planting concepts while also adding shade to combat heat island effect along our paths and open spaces. The trees to be preserved are depicted with transparent green circles, and our proposed trees are shown in solid dark green. Our layered ecological understory within the project boundaries is part of a park-wide approach to increase biodiversity. Ferns and woody shrub understory will line the stadium's north entry, blending the site with the existing woodland. As we move south, fescues and native meadow buffers will be reintroduced and transition the place to the Playstead's open lawn. As part of our Article 80 review process, our teams prepared shadow studies across different hours and seasons to ensure the stadium design minimizes shadows in the park. Here are the spring shadows. And here are the summer shadows. As you'll see in this section, the gray shade represents the existing shadow, the blue is the new shadow of the west grandstand, and the purple is the net shadow of the east grandstand. The shadows are similar to the existing shadow patterns, however, are slightly increased due to the new stadium design. And here we have the fall season. One important takeaway is that the shadows do not fall on the Playstead at any time throughout the year. And finally, the winter. The landscape architecture teams are selecting shade-tolerant species that can be easily maintained in these more shaded areas east of the stadium. Handing over to Tamara.
Hello, Park Commissioners. I'm Tamara Roy from Stantec Boston. I'll present some of the architectural design choices that center the program needs of the stadium's most frequent users, the Boston Public School students, and also address the needs of the Boston Unity program. Next. Based on the goals for BPS athletics, you can see here a ground floor plan of all the new amenities that the stadium will provide. Next. We've worked diligently with the Landmarks Commission to preserve and protect the West Clamshell Wall, to preserve the history of the 1949 White Stadium. New elements, including new accessible public spaces, bucket seats, and all new building systems, sit behind the West Clamshell Wall. The canopies are inspired by Olmsted's original Overlook building, shown on the upper left. Next. Architect and design teams work together to produce a diagram that both teams are following to coordinate our work in design development. The first layer is the outer shell, a white precast concrete that is more modern on the east side, references the historic wall in the west, and is open on the south toward the park and the Playstead. The second layer features curving wood-toned walls and railings around the wings and the grandstands. The third layer includes seating bowls with very similar profiles and multicolored green bucket seats. And the final fourth layer consists of the canopies for rain cover, sun shade, and noise containment, and they're all matching in style and height from east to west. The South Crescent building role is to welcome everyone in from the Playstead, providing food and beverages that haven't existed in Franklin Park for decades, and livening up the new open space of the Grove. The building can be opened on both sides to get views and access all the way through. The coordinated stadium and landscape improvements will have numerous sustainable design features, making it one of the first 3 soccer stadiums in the United States to be net zero carbon. We're so proud that the project fulfills Mayor Wu's resiliency goals, and we are ecstatic that this will be the new hub for the next generation of BPS student athletes who deserve to learn and play in state-of-the-art facilities close to home. Chris?
In this section, we'll continue to expand on the Grove and Playstead design updates. The Grove provides the South Crescent building with a shaded, flexible event space, providing respite on hot days. The Grove has been designed for flexible use and will provide seasonal events, giving opportunities to local vendors and businesses. At our 3rd design meeting, we surveyed the public and heard many wonderful suggestions, such as Tai Chi, children's storytelling, small musical performances, and neighborhood celebrations. A permanent leaning rail will surround the outdoor shaded dining area adjacent to the South Crescent building. We're also removing the existing chain link fence surrounding the future Grove and replacing it with a flexible removable fence system. On a typical day, there will be no fence. The Grove will be given back to the Playstead and will be perceived as part of the wider park landscape. When required for small events, discrete short-term fencing will be installed around the Grove. Next. And for Boston Unity soccer games, a taller fence will be installed to create a secure event space with ticketed entrances. Handing to Brian.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brian Bizel. I'm an associate principal at Howard Stein Hudson, and we are the transportation consultants for the project. In response to the Franklin Park Action Plan's recommendation to reduce vehicular traffic within the park, we will be improving the pedestrian and bike paths with the primary loop shown in purple on this slide, a secondary path shown in green, and tertiary paths in yellow around the new stadium. This will encourage the year-round use of public transportation and improve pedestrian biking pathways within the park. For Boston Unity event days, along with these improvements, we will also not have any spectator parking within the park on game days. The overlay shown now, refined through transportation meetings with neighbors, clarifies the stadium's operations for service, access, and logistics for up to 20 games, and includes the following elements: walking and biking routes within the park, shuttle routes within the park, shown in the magenta, connecting with T stations and satellite parking, and a managed rideshare location shown by Seaver Street. Through conversations with neighbors, we have made adjustments to the number of shuttles on each route and committed to the use of electric shuttles within 3 years. And another addition since the last time we've been in front of the commissioners is that the North Loop off of Walnut Avenue, as shown again in the magenta, now enters and exits from the existing driveway, which means there is not going to be a new vehicular entrance or exit into Franklin Park as was previously envisioned. There will be approximately 5,000 people if the stadium is at capacity arriving from the north and south, including the North Loop shuttle I just talked about, and also the Valley Gates shuttle loop, which is down by Circuit Drive. And then there'll be an additional 1,000 coming from the east, from the rideshare and from neighborhoods surrounding Franklin Park. Next slide.
Thanks, Brian. We'll now present 4 detailed demolition plans. Next slide. So this slide outlines the demolition work zone for both projects. As highlighted in orange, pedestrian circulation will be maintained across the park. Temporary construction fencing is a combination of permanent fencing around the outer limits for demo, with temporary movable fencing to be adjusted with later phases of renovation. The construction teams will be in constant contact with the Parks Department to ensure daily park operations runs efficiently. We acknowledge that there are going to be impacts to folks who use Franklin Park on a daily basis during construction, but we are committed to minimizing disruptions. Next slide. This plan outlines the site preparation scope of work to facilitate removal of the existing structures. For the west grandstand, this will include the preservation of the existing clamshell wall as shown, highlighted in blue. Outdated utilities to be removed are highlighted in red and will be replaced with all new utility infrastructure. Some existing utilities will be critical to maintain, such as drainage trunk lines, highlighted in blue. This demo work is also shown in the context of tree protection extents and critical root zones, highlighting the importance of protecting these areas. Next slide. Here you see tree protection for both the demolition phase, shown in blue, and future work, shown in pink. Tree protection fencing installation will be overseen by the project landscape architects and consulting arborists. Next slide. And this shows tree removals and their existing conditions that we discussed earlier. To reiterate, most tree removals are either in poor condition, are invasive species, or are growing into fences or walls. Next slide. We will now summarize the benefits we believe that this updated design complements the park landscape and community needs. Next slide. Here are a few community benefits and mitigation commitments whose implementation will be reviewed by the Neighborhood Council. We'll be forming a White Stadium Neighborhood Advisory Council comprised of community members, district councilors from surrounding neighborhoods to provide ongoing feedback on stadium operations and commitments. There will be established a $500,000 annual community fund distributed over 4 pillars: investment in Franklin Park, youth sports events and programming, local business development, and promoting health and wellness of local communities. As mentioned before, electric shuttles within 3 years is a commitment for BUSB. And there'll be a $1 surcharge on ticket sales to directly fund the implementation of the Franklin Park Action Plan recommendations. Next slide. The plans for the construction, operations, and programming will require ongoing engagement, so we will have regular community meetings, come back to landmarks and parks to share updates, and establish the White Stadium Neighborhood Council. This once-in-a-generation opportunity has far-reaching, next slide, future benefits to Franklin Park and its neighbors. We hope that this presentation conveys a design for all park visitors, opens up access to valuable park space within which local community members can play, learn, grow, and build community. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity and promises significant future benefits for Franklin Park and its neighbors. We hope that this updated design shows our goal of opening access to Franklin Park through a unique community-centered partnership, giving back valuable space for community members to play, learn, and grow, as I said before. So thank you again, and I'll pass it over to Sam.
Thanks, Dion. And that's the end of our formal presentation. I'll now ask Sammy to provide a short legal update.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, commissioners. My name is Sammy Nabulsi, and I'm counsel to the City of Boston on the White Stadium project. During the course of the number of public hearings that Chief Irish had spoken about, there have been questions about the ongoing legal status of the project and questions about the ongoing litigation. And so I wanted to just give a brief update on that, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions from the commissioners. Some of you may know, in February of this year, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy and a number of individual plaintiffs filed an action challenging the project in Suffolk Superior Court on primarily 2 grounds, one being the applicability of Article 97 to this White Stadium parcel that just sits north of the general Franklin Park parcel, and also whether the project complies with the will of George Robert White, and specifically Article 14th, which is administered by the George Robert White Fund trustees, who act as sort of the fee owners of this particular parcel. At the same time that the complaint was filed, the Emerald Necklace and the plaintiffs also filed a motion for a preliminary injunction, which the city and also the team opposed, and we were fully briefed and heard in March of this year. And towards the end of March, the Suffolk Superior Court issued a very well-written, well-reasoned 32-page decision on the preliminary injunction denying it, but also opining on the merits of the action. And what the court concluded at that time is that the plaintiffs are unlikely to succeed on the merits of any of their claims, including whether Article 97 applies to the project, the judge concluding that it does not, and then also whether the project complies with the will of George Robert White, the judge concluding that it did. After the preliminary injunction decision came out at the end of March, the parties then entered sort of the discovery or fact-finding phase of the case, which is where we are now. Originally, the discovery period was supposed to go through about February of 2026, which, as many of you know and may have been noted in this presentation earlier, but certainly in others, is only a month before anticipated league play for the team. And so in order to get some clarity on this case and also to have this case resolved in due time, both the city and the team asked the court to expedite and condense the timeline of the case. And so at the moment, discovery is scheduled to actually end in December of this year, and we have an outside trial date to finally dispose of the case beginning on March 18 of 2025. I'm happy to, of course, stick around and answer any questions, and if it's useful, of course, to share a copy of the Superior Court's written decision on the merits of plaintiff's claim. I'm happy to work with our team here to get it over to the commission staff and commissioners as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. We're now prepared for any questions, and I think we turn it back over to the commission.
Thank you, Sam and the team, for your presentation. Yes, we'll go into some questions from our commissioners. Just to start it off, I have a couple that I'd like to see if we could go a little more in depth on. We've touched on previous presentations about community usage and BPS usage of the site, and that there'd be an increase in usage from what's currently provided today at White Stadium. Didn't know if you could touch a little more on what the increase would be.
Yeah, Leah, if you could actually go back up to the schedule slide. And I think this may be an opportunity for me to call on Anshi to speak to, or Dion. But in general terms, we are looking to expand access in multiple ways through literal square footage of the park that will be open, but also through extra days and hours within days throughout the year.
Right, and this includes weekend usage as well. Okay.
That's right.
Second question, Sam, might be for you as well. With the recently passing of the tree ordinance, didn't know if you could talk about future plans to talk about a public meeting as required by the new ordinance, and any plans for how to regain the canopy that we're losing in the park.
Absolutely. And Leah, if you could go back to the tree. Yeah, this perfect. So first of all, we want to reiterate that we are adhering to, though we are all together learning the new tree ordinance that was passed a few months ago, we are adhering strictly to it in terms of all removals. So first of all removals are, will be flagged physically on site in preparation for the tree meeting. Which we have yet to pin down the exact date, but it should be in the next month or so. We are actually taking the intent of the tree ordinance, and though it is not required by the tree ordinance, we are mitigating the removals by replacing caliper inch to caliper inch. So that's what you can see here in the bottom right of this slide. 500 new trees planted as part of the White Stadium Tree Bank. So in partnership between the city and the team, Boston Unity, we are looking to plant at least 500 new trees by establishing this new fund, a White Stadium Tree Bank. This would be funds that are restricted for use by the Parks Department over the next 10 years within Franklin Park to more than mitigate the removals of what is lost. And of course, all species that would be planted, following Park's decision would be native species. They would be climate adapted, including the changes of climate change are coming. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
I should also mention that is to mitigate the difference between what is lost and what is planted as part of the project. And this slide 15 is really useful to see that. So of course, both sides of the project, east and west, have planting within their project that are, as you can see, based upon not only ecological performance, but the Olmsted legacy.
Thank you. I'll open it up to other commissioners for questions they have.
Thanks, Ryan. I guess I'll chime in. Sam, I'd like, if maybe possible, we can get a little more granular when we talk about the additional uses by BPS. I think to go a little bit deeper into what Ryan was asking a moment ago. I hear anecdotally there's an increase of usage, but I'd like a little bit more specific as to what that usage is. And I would like to address any displaced uses, either current or historic, that's no longer going to be a possibility at this site, and contrast that with additional uses coming into the site. Can we get more specific information, please?
Absolutely. And Leah, if you could actually put us onto the floor plan, the floor plan of both sides, that slide would be helpful while we talk through this. So the BPS uses that this project will create are based on extensive consultation and requests from BPS coaches and administrators. This, as you can see, is more than just a field with seats is what's being created. So there are a student resource room, a community room, proper locker rooms, functioning bathrooms, kitchen, but then some more exciting programmatic additions are the BPS strength and conditioning room that you can see here. And then there's also a sports medicine program. So these are all things that do not currently exist at the stadium. Some of them do not exist in the city of Boston. And they are all going to be state-of-the-art facilities on the east side. I think the other part of your question is maybe about hours of access. Is that right?
And I'd like some specific information on those hours of access. As I understand it, we're going to be losing some of the current programming for the site. So I'd like to discuss what we're losing in the context of what we're gaining.
Okay. Yeah.
I think some specific
I'm happy to
athletic
talk
uses.
on this.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Anshi, that would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so if we could go back a slide. So there's the actual construction of the facilities, but what you're talking about is the actual scheduling and programming. So right now, there are soccer teams, football teams, and a few like kids' summer camps and strength and conditioning, track and field practices that happen here. What currently happens is many of those practices are moved when there's rain or there's poor conditions on the site because there's not good drainage system. So with these renovations and the indoor amenities as well, these are the programs that we'll have year-round access to. What we are, what you're talking about is the football program that currently plays 10 games at the stadium. And while we're working through the trade-off of, adding more sports year round, both indoor and outdoor amenities that all teams can use, we're thinking about what it looks like to have a home field for all football teams. So right now, most of them do have a home base, but the two that play some games at White Stadium do not have a home field. So we're working with the coaches and the students to figure out, we have the relocation sites figured out for the fall, but we know we need long-term homes for BLA and BLS football. So we're working through what our plan is long-term in consultation with the coaches. So that's one of the losses that we're trying to mitigate in this process, and also ensure like everyone has a home field. Besides that, we are adding also the new basketball courts and tennis courts. So we're excited to be able to provide spaces that can be programmed at a higher level, including going from a 6 to 8 lane track and going from 2 tennis courts to around 4 or 5. And that allows students to be able to compete at a higher level. So we're working with the athletics department to review their program right now and to figure out how do we scale up with the resources, staffing, and the right support systems between the departments here to make sure that it makes sense for the needs of the program, and that we can handle it long term. So that's what we're working through over the next few months.
Can I just add on to this quickly, to add to what Anchi mentioned, like for football in particular, the district is committed to making sure that all football programs have a home field. Currently, we have 2 teams that don't have a home field and have been the only ones using White Stadium. The future White Stadium will have opportunities for every single school in the district to play football in the stadium, as well as be able to be there for we have a robust soccer program, so we envision that there'd be more demand within the district to be in White Stadium. The 8-lane track and field will certainly, I think, increase track and field activity. The indoor spaces will lend itself to year-round activation, and there will also be built-in community space, indoor space, as well as just having the track, access to the track in the stadium itself being more available to community. I know folks are already envisioning going for morning runs on the track and things of that nature. So I think overall, those are some more specific things that reasons why we believe there will be much more community and BPS use of the new White Stadium.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Anchi. This slide in particular is very helpful to understand the additional athletic programming that's happening at the stadium to help weigh some of the losses with the football team. I appreciate that. Another question that I had is regarding the removal of trees. I understand we've got the bank of 500 trees. That's fantastic. Very excited about that. Can we get a little bit more information about the immediate net gain or net loss by the activities of the construction? So as soon as the construction is done and we start programming the soccer, what is the condition of the trees that are lost and replaced?
And Leah, if you could go back to the tree slide, the handy tree slide. William, this is a great question. You know, I've worked in landscape architecture for more than a decade, and I think even if you don't, you know that when a tree is cut down, there's a period of time it takes for a new tree to grow in its place. This is the reason we are not mitigating 1-for-1, which is often a standard, is take one tree down, put one up. Because as you can imagine, with a 40-inch caliper, you know, tree removal, planting a 2.5-inch caliper tree, meaning the inches of trunk, can take an incredibly long time to recover. That is why we're using the industry standard of one caliper inch to 1 caliper inch. The idea being that these plantings collectively, though not in that exact point on the site, will mitigate that loss sooner. And then over time, there's actually the potential for far more expansion of tree canopy. That said, you know, I do want to be clear here that there are fewer, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but there's fewer than 100 trees to be planted as part of the project, meaning, you know, by the first day of soccer. And those trees, as you can imagine, range from 2-inch caliper to possibly as large as 6-inch caliper trees. So the mitigation will not be immediate, but it is guaranteed. And that is really a product not of limited resources, but of limited space. So as you can see here, this to me is a pretty maxed out planting program for the parcel. We can't plant all 500 trees within the limits. And it is actually through consultation with park staff, the city arborist, the tree warden, that we've gotten to this idea of the tree bank. So limiting new planting over the next 10 years, so it's actually practicable by the Parks Department, limiting it within Franklin Park, because there are plenty of essentially holes to fill in the canopy. And I should say all of this really is another outgrowth or a bolstering of the Franklin Park Action Plan, which has very clear recommendations on long-term ecological change of the forest, as well as restoring some of those signature plantings that were part of the original Olmsted vision. Does that answer your question?
It does. And you said there will be less than 100 trees immediately planted, but I assume you mean close to 100 though?
It is close to 100, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Excellent. My last question before I hand it over to others, and Sammy, this may be a question for you. It's beyond the design review that's before us, but I am interested. What exactly is being leased to the private entity? What property interests are being conveyed versus what property interests are being held and retained by the city? I ask this question in the context of there are a lot of promises being made, lots of benefits that are very clear, but I think a lot of folks have concerns about how we're going to be able to enforce those and make sure that nothing is forgotten or nothing is lost in the weeds. So can someone speak to me just a little bit about what are the actual lease interests rights being conveyed to the private entity versus what's being held and retained by the city of Boston?
Yes, I'm happy to. Thank you, Commissioner. The first I want to just say I completely agree with you. There are a number of commitments being made, and it's vitally important that these end up in written and enforceable agreements. And that's why, I'll point back to what Liza said earlier about the constellation of written agreements that will exist between the city and Boston Unity to enforce and have written somewhere all of those commitments, and those agreements will all work in tandem with one another to ensure that that all of those commitments are in fact met. Regarding the actual interest, so I'll start from a place that the city, the most important part of this for the city was to make sure that the city maintained and retained control of the general site and those parts of the property that are important to the Boston Public School kids. And that's the field, it's the track, and it's the spaces that Boston Public Schools athletics program has and will continue to use at the site to run a robust athletics department. And so with that being said, what the city is actually leasing is just the West Grandstand. And then the area, if you look at this aerial view, where it says South Crescent and the Grove, there's a fenced-in area just south of the field today. That area is also being leased to BUSP as part of this ground lease agreement. The purpose of that is it allows the city to retain and continue to control use of the actual field and the track, and then also the East Grandstand and some of the in the wings, as you see here, in order to continue to operate Boston Public Schools athletic programs, and then all the additional community and school uses that Sam spoke about earlier. Now, obviously, on game days, the team is going to need to be able to use the field and use the seats on the East Grandstand. And equally important, the city is going to need to be able to use the seats and some of the public facilities that are associated with the West Grandstand, and also this south area south of the field. And so in addition to the lease agreement, there is another legal document called a stadium usage agreement. What that stadium usage agreement does is that's where there's a reciprocal license associated with uses. So on days that Boston Public Schools has events, and also just when there are no events and it's for general community use, a license from the team to the city, so that the city and the community and Boston Public Schools students can benefit from those leased premises. And then on game days, that same document provides a license from the city to the team, so that patrons, game goers, are able to sit on the East Grandstand in the seats and observe and watch and watch those games. And to be clear, with respect to ownership, nothing is changing. The city is not selling or conveying any property interest other than the lease for the West Grandstand and that area south of the stadium labeled here as the Grove.
Sammy, the stadium use agreement that you're talking about, how durable is it? Is it an exhibit to the lease? Is it something separate? How is it going to be enforced?
So the stadium usage agreement is, I'll start from a place of it's a written contract. It's going to be between the city and the team, and it's going to work in tandem with the lease, such that, at least from the city's point of view and perspective, these documents are not signed yet. So I will preface everything by saying, from the city's perspective, these documents will cross default. So they'll work together. They reference one another in their current drafts. You violate the lease, you violate the other documents, you violate the stadium use agreement, you violate the lease, and the city's going to have a whole host of remedies to address those issues, including but not limited to termination rights.
All right. Thank you very much, Sammy. I'll pause here and let others have a chance.
Questions from the other commissioners?
I did have a couple of questions, clarifying questions. Someone had mentioned that there would be six new maintenance staff hired specifically for Franklin Park. Will those staff be reporting to the Parks Department, or will they be reporting to Boston Public Schools or some other entity?
Thanks, Commissioner Quealy. Those are Parks Department staff. I don't know if someone from Parks can share more information on that. We presented that for context, but those are not employees of the stadium or at the stadium. Just to clarify.
Understood. I guess a couple of other thoughts I had. One is someone mentioned a shared governance structure with the Franklin Park Coalition, I believe, and the formation of a White Stadium Advisory Council. But I guess in my mind, I guess I'm wondering why that didn't happen before all of this, before we came to the point of needing to have a vote on demolition, which basically moves the project forward fairly significantly. Can someone address that particular topic?
I can say if this is the first time you're hearing of it, it actually has been being negotiated, being set up for several months. But I don't know if Anchi or if Dion may speak more on how that's coming together.
Yes, we're super excited about this because we need support and we need to get it right and find the right level of programming and scheduling that fits both expanding the BPS program, giving those resources for community events, but also allowing time for just free open space. So the committee will comprise of all the city councilors from the area, as well as representatives from all three neighborhoods, and include the city departments, parks, BPS, and the mayor's office to make sure that we are all held accountable. Boston Unity, of course, is also a partner on all of this. So we'll continue to refine the details of like how this would work, but at minimum, the group will meet every year at latest following the first game day of that year. And we'll set up a regular cadence of meetings where they will bring up issues and be that sounding board of the community. But also they will review reports from Boston Unity that Boston Unity's partners will provide on the operations, transportation, et cetera, all these issues that really matter to the community, and that we haven't had one project to really gather all of us around the same table and to figure out how we put the pieces together. So that's, don't have a set timeline right now because we've been focused on getting through, design and permitting and getting that right. But that'll be that next stage where we really need to establish how we move that forward. And it is part of the lease.
And I can say we'd be happy to present more details as that will be much more set up by the time we're in front of you again.
Understood. And this is not the first time I'm hearing about it. I guess my point is maybe some of this should have happened before this point.
Point taken. Thank you.
I do applaud the tree restoration and removals plan. I did have a clarifying question around the 500 trees. So is that essentially a virtual or real nursery of trees that'll just be used to replace trees as they fail, or when would 500 trees actually get planted within Franklin Park?
It's a great question. So I should say that we are still negotiating this with the Parks Department, with Todd Mister, with Max, but where we are headed with that, we're starting with the very clear goal of canopy improvement and expansion. So one of the questions we're wrestling with right now is whether these trees, these virtual trees, which will be planted, whether they can be used on capital improvements within the park or not. One thing we know is they will be used to replace dead, dying, or diseased trees, to essentially set another 50 to 100 years of tree growth there at least. But that is still in negotiation, and it really comes down to parks preferences in managing the park. It also comes down to almost a philosophical basis that we're trying to unite on. But I will say that we're very excited for it, and we are thrilled that that Unity is willing to be a participant in funding it.
Okay.
I can jump in here. I'm sorry, Commissioner Quealy. This is Diana Fernandez, Deputy Chief of Urban Design with the Planning Department. One thing to note as well is that the tree bank itself also includes funding for not just the planting of the tree, but also maintenance and installation of those trees. So a 2-year maintenance period to ensure the success of those trees that are planted over that duration. So we do see this as a tree bank that can establish canopy over the next 10 years within the park. And as Sam noted here, really working through the details here with the Parks Department to assess where and how those trees should be planted, and what are some strategic focus areas that have already been identified in the action plan as in need of restoration.
Thank you. Related question, Diana, does that maintenance plan include watering for the 2 years or longer?
It does. Yeah, watering, any supplementary fertilizing, pruning, all of the traditional warranty period maintenance involved in a tree planting.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. Someone mentioned the stadium will be net zero, one of the first 3 in the US, which is great. How do you plan to get to net zero? And are you going for a LEED certification or some other kind of certification to establish that?
Yeah, so I can start, and then I may hand it to Tamara Roy. First of all, the project has already committed to a gold standard for LEED, but we are targeting platinum. So there are still obviously a lot of design nuances to get worked out before we know that the scorecard is going to go that way. But Tamara, do you want to step in and speak more?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. And hello, Commissioner Quealy. So we have sustainability measures across all categories of architecture, landscape, and engineering. And we're also looking at low carbon choices as well, low embodied carbon of concrete, timber. But generally, our approach is using insulated high-performance wall and roof assemblies, and making sure that we have really careful attention to the comprehensive building envelope at all our conditioned spaces. One thing that's interesting about stadiums is that a lot of the area is outside and non-conditioned, which is great. So it uses less energy. And, we're definitely going for all electric in all the systems throughout the building. And we are coordinating with the East on exactly the same thing for all of our utilities.
Thank you. That's all I had for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Questions?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to pick up on what some of the other commissioners are saying and asking relative to the programming. And I think you've already provided some very helpful information. And I'm trying to frame it up in my mind and make sure that I have a very clear understanding of this, because I think it's absolutely essential to come away from this with an understanding that Boston Public Schools will have opportunities for very, very robust programming of this facility once it's constructed. And based on the information on one of the slides that I was reviewing, it seemed to be indicating that under the current conditions, soccer and football are accommodated to a certain extent at White Stadium. And sometimes that programming is interrupted due to poor weather and so forth. And that will always be an issue, current condition, future condition. when I looked at that slide, it seemed like if we're talking about exterior, meaning out of the grandstand footprint activities, it seems like what will be accommodated on a going forward basis would be soccer, track and field, lacrosse, football, to a certain extent, understanding that some of that program is not available on a going forward basis in the fall. Cheer and dance. So those are 5 different sports or outdoor activities from Boston Public Schools that seem like they would be able to make use of this facility on a going forward basis. So I just want to understand that that is a correct interpretation on my part. And perhaps somebody could speak to, I guess, the level of use that the field itself. I mean, after all, the focal point of White Stadium for 7 decades has been the exterior athletic elements, primarily the field. And I think it's important to understand that a natural turf field, if it's to be maintained in superior condition, appropriate for professional women's soccer use, there are some limitations that will have to be placed on use of the field, even in those times where it's available to Boston Public Schools or the community. So I wonder if someone could speak to, number one, am I interpreting that these post-construction activities for Boston Public Schools correctly? And then maybe speak a little bit more to limitations on the use of the field by these Boston Public School programs that would be required in order to maintain the field in superior condition.
Thank you, Commissioner Bellinger. I think there are a few questions to unpack in there. Maybe the first I want to address is the question of how much activity can the natural grass field accommodate in the stadium? And I will say this certainly will be a balancing act. One thing that is great by having Unity as a partner is it brings a professional, world-class maintenance program to the field so that we can really maximize the use and repair the damage from wear and tear. Another thing is, to your point, we will be making sure that it's documented in the negotiated lease and shared use how much will be used by each entity, and also making sure that the school program is essentially not squeezed out. That it is not for favor of soccer. The field cannot be used for this and that. So I don't know if Anshi, if you're able to speak more about the sports program in general, kind of what will be there, how it will be used.
Yeah, so I think the programming, we're working with the athletics department to see what support and resources they need, and Parks is also involved with non-BPS programming. So this will be one of the main responsibilities of the neighborhood council, is to help us find the right balance of programming. So we want to maintain that everyday recreational use, like dog walkers or runners coming out in the morning, and then some community events that are already held there. So to find that right balance, we'll need the council's support and to figure out what the priorities of the community are. We don't envision, huge events in the park every weekend. That's certainly not the case here. We want to return it to what its original purpose is, and improve that open space and access to it. So I don't have a perfect answer for you, but what we're looking to expand that access for everyday use, and figure out the exact programming later on.
I think as well, just to add to that, on top of what Sam has said, there's going to be a high-class field that's being installed, that is being designed to withstand this high use, and also the maintenance program that's being set up is also something that we, as a team, are making sure can withstand this increased use, including things like UV light for growing grass in the fall and the darker months. So this is something that we are understanding and integrating into the design of the pitch.
Thanks, Chris. I'd just like add a final point to this because that's an important point that you made, and it is important for us to note that the existing condition is a challenge where the field is not as available as it could be due to the type of drainage that is there. So what we will have post renovation, which will be a much superior surface, and as Chris mentioned, the idea is to make sure that it's available to the as much as possible for all uses.
Okay, thank you, all of you, for those responses. I just think it's really helpful, you know, to be able to hang your hat on information that's as precise as possible. And I think we just have to come away with a very clear understanding that this is a big victory for Boston Public Schools. So I think anything that can be done to communicate that and verify that with empirical information is helpful on a going forward basis. Okay, thank you. I guess I just wanted to touch on one other subject, and it's related to the design of the overall facility. And I think that a lot of great listening has been going on over the past months to arrive at a conceptual design that seems to be better integrated into the Boston School Department property and the surrounding Franklin Park landscape. And I just wanted to afford an opportunity maybe for you folks to discuss the level of interaction with the authors and participants of the Franklin Park Action Plan, and including their contributions as this design continued to be refined. And after all, some might consider that White Stadium back in the 1940s was an intrusion into Franklin Park. And there's probably been many other elements over the years that could be considered intrusions, like the zoo and the Shattuck and the golf course and so on and so forth. I think at this point in time, though, we have a stadium that's underperforming. It's not supporting a lot of programming use. And my perspective is that a renovated facility that really sticks within its current footprint and doesn't impose on the surrounding Olmstedian landscape is something that is helpful to the city and the public schools and to the community that has increased use of the resulting amenities. So if someone could maybe speak to that coordination that's been occurring, including the Franklin Park Coalition itself, that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner. And, you know, I should say it's actually been more than just coordination. It's sometimes been an education for all of us. So at the beginning of the year, and I see Lydia and John Kett are on the line. I may call on them if that's appropriate to speak. But we contacted, we being the team, we contacted Reed Hildebrand to better understand the impacts of this stadium and how its rehabilitation could be reshaped. As you may know, the action plan was published before these plans for revitalized White Stadium were announced. But from the very beginning, we latched on to some very clear directives that are embodied in the document. It says very clearly, open up White Stadium. And though we don't have all of those slides here, that's something that we in the BPDA, the planning department, embraced, but it's also something both teams have embraced. And we've seen some really powerful sketches showing that essentially everything that can be yielded or given back to the playstead or to the park in terms of square footage is achieved. So there's over an acre of land that is now going to be opened up to the playstead that's currently fenced off and crowded with invasives. But beyond that, some of the most important central tenets of Reed Hildebrand's interpretation of the playstead were these open view corridors, you know, from Walnut Ave out to the expanse of the playstead. And this design, you know, through its reworking, now prioritizes those view sheds, those view corridors. And I don't know if I can invite Reed Hildebrand to speak, if they feel up to it. I can continue though that, yeah, so this diagram, it's an inset, but you can see here on the right, south of the stadium, essentially what is the lease boundary exactly. That on normal days, on non-game days, on 345 days a year, that will be accessible land to those average park visitors. Another thing that shaped this stadium on the east side is that the original drawings for the BPS facilities were actually spreading farther to the right, to the east towards Playstead Road. And by prioritizing these views from some of the Roxbury pudding stone on the east side that will be preserved as character defining features, the view from there to the Playstead, we're actually making improvements in terms of opening that up, removing, the clutter of the basketball that you see, and tightening the overall footprint to that end. And I'd
Hey,
welcome
Sam.
anyone to chime in.
Hey,
Yeah.
Sam, sorry, I was unable to mute there for a second, but I'm here. This is John
Thanks,
Kett,
John.
with Reed Hildebrand. And if you could maybe restate the question, I was switching devices from my computer to my phone right when I heard my voice, my name mentioned.
Yeah. So Commissioner Bollinger's question was, in what way has this project been shaped or coordinated with the action plan? And I mentioned Reed Hildebrand, how you all have really helped us all reframe how this stadium can be an asset to the action plan, and also how it fits into the legacy of the Olmsted legacy for the park. Though
Yeah, thanks.
the stadium
Perfect.
was built after the Olmsted era, and this project was announced after the completion of the action plan.
Got it. Yeah, so thanks, Commissioner Bollinger, for the question. As Sam's probably just stated, I think the first effort in finding alignment with the action plan was to go through and see where the recommendations of the action plan had addressed areas within the Playstead, and that were not specific to this project within the Playstead, but specific to the goals of how to bring back the character of the Playstead and restore more of it to public use. Central to that was removing barriers throughout the Playstead, most directly the fencing on the south end of the stadium today, which not only keeps the public from accessing a portion of the site, but it also sends a message of keep out, which the goal of the action plan was really to invite and welcome people into all of the spaces that are accessible within the park. And then, as Sam mentioned, we were asked to come in and help to really build the case for what it takes to make change in a park of this significance and at this scale. And so we developed a series of principles. I believe we presented those to you at the last meeting with this commission, which, as Sam is saying, are rooted in what are the character defining features of the Playstead, which is based in its topography as a valley set between the ridge lines of the Long Crouch Woods and the Overlook Pavilion and the wilderness, framed by oak woodlands, and then groves of oak, which Olmsted planted, that shape circulation as it moves around the edges, and this more open center, which of course the stadium occupies that open center, but understanding how you can bring back that relationship to the kind of openness of the Playstead with the new stadium design. And then of course, I think really one of the most significant things we've been able to work through with the design teams here is respecting the overlook itself and the prominence of the overlook looking out across the valley of the Playstead, and making sure that didn't encroach on that and really left space for that to be connected to the Playstead, which, as you can see, the design has evolved quite significantly. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, John. Gene, do you have any other further questions?
Yes, no, I don't, Commissioner, and thank you to John and Sam. I think that it's very helpful to just put in perspective that the advancement of the project is really being done in a manner that's respectful of the park itself and the original Olmsted intent and the action plan that was just completed. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Birdseye?
Yes, Commissioner Bollinger actually anticipated my exact question, so that I think that's been very well covered. But I do want to commend the teams that have been working on the design for opening up a lot more visual space, integrating the new design of the stadium into the open space. You know, keeping as much of the natural characteristics that are part of Olmsted's design as possible, and using a lot of elements that are going to make it feel that it's part of the landscape instead of an imposition on it. So I'm very appreciative of how much work and how responsive they've been to input from both the Parks Commission and from the community comments. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Piero Washington, any questions at this time?
No questions at this time. As a BPS graduate who played soccer for Brighton High School, I agree with uplifting the parts of this project that are really going to benefit and change the lives of our BPS student athletes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the commissioners before we go into public testimony?
Briefly, it might be helpful to hear just a little bit more about the transportation planning. Specifically, I'm interested in the walk time from the nearest station, I believe it's Stony Brook, in addition to any wayfinding measures that might be being considered to try to, facilitate that walk, and anything that the proponents are doing to encourage public transit. Can we hear just a little bit more about the transportation planning that's going into this?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so the closest stations are Green Street and Stony Brook. They are less than a mile away, about a 15-minute walk. But more importantly, we are going to be having shuttles from at least Jackson Square and Forest Hills. So Jackson Square would be for people coming on the Orange Line, and then Forest Hills would be the multitude of buses that are there. So it's not only just take the T and then walk, which a lot of people can and will do, but we're also going the extra step of, putting people on the T and then getting them in shuttles to get them to the site as quick as possible.
Thank you. And then the other point that I wanted to hear a little bit more, I hear that we're going for LEED certifiable, but is there also a commitment to actually file and get the structure certified?
I will let Tamara answer that and chime in if she's not ready to.
I'll say for the west side, we've registered it under LEED, William. I'm not sure exactly if we will continue through to the very end of certification. Right now, we're still gathering the points, and we've committed to gold, but we're targeting platinum, actually.
That's good to hear. My own personal preference, I think there's value in the actual certification. So if that decision is ever contemplated, I would encourage to actually go all the way.
We'll note that. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
No question for me, but I'd like to suggest that we move to public comment.
With that, I'm going to add Liza Meyer, just anything that we forgot, Liza, as we do in all of our Parks Commission meetings.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just quickly to add a couple of points that are mostly in the memo that was shared with commissioners ahead of time, but just in response to some questions, Commissioner Quealy asked a good question of why now with some of the investments in time and attention around park management and collaboration with community members. And I want to note that a lot of the recommendations that came out of the action plan were focused on building a stronger governance structure for the park, continuing to engage with community members who participated in the action plan, so that we build on the connections we built through that process, and continue to have some better systems in place for ensuring community input on projects going forward. So while yes, the White Stadium project is what we're looking at today, there are many other projects that are also unfolding in Franklin Park that the Parks Department is moving forward with associated with the action plan. One of those is the Overlook programming and design study. We have designers on board. We'll be moving forward with that this summer and engaging the community around what the future of the Overlook ruins and terrace should be, potentially as a performance space for the Alma Lewis, but also, you know, there could be some other uses that are brought into the space. We're beginning work to calm traffic on Circuit Drive. You know, these are some of the things that were raised by the community as essential to move forward with from the action plan process. So I just want to point that we are moving forward with these. Traffic calming on Circuit Drive and improving drainage along Circuit Drive, which has been a long standing issue for anyone who moves through the park. We'll be looking at investments at the Shattuck picnic area to see if we can expand tennis there for community use of all types. And also noted earlier was investments in operations at the park. We're in the process of hiring the director of Franklin Park, who will oversee and coordinate all of the happenings in the park from a programmatic standpoint, but also in ensuring that you know, volunteers and community members have a point person who they can connect with, that departments who are all doing projects that have an impact on the park have a point person who they connect with, and adding the maintenance staff to bolster our current maintenance crew and develop a natural resources crew are all actions that are being taken in response to the recommendations of the action plan. So I think these are really important steps forward that we should be thinking about the park as a whole, not just around White Stadium, which is what we're here talking about today. And I think that's all I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thanks, Liza. So we will go into public comment. We will have a time. We're trying to keep it to 2 minutes. There'll be a little timer on there so you can see your time as you're giving your public comment or statements. I do want to state for the record, as of 10 minutes ago checking, we were up to 31 letters that have been received on this project, both some in support, some in opposition, and the names they came from and their locations, just so it's stated. And these have all been shared with all the commissioners through public folder as soon as any letter has come in. Terraria Green, with no location noted. Anna Esteen from Boston, Molly McCarthy from Appleton, Wisconsin, James Lindbergh from Santa Fe, New Mexico, Reverend Jennifer Daly from Boston, Ann Whiteside from Boston, Weed Raggle Organization, Janet Plotkin from Cambridge, Alita Silverman from Atlanta, Georgia, Judith Rice Jones from Colorado Springs, Colorado, Reverend Mary Robinson from Brookline, Clinton Brown from Buffalo, New York, Jennifer Ott from Seattle, Washington, Stan Everett from Back Bay Fens area, Sarah Freeman from Boston, Mass, Susan Rice from Boston, Mass, Fran Harrington from Jamaica Plain, Dee Dee Petrie, President and CEO of the Olmsted Network from Washington, D.C., Dorothy Fennell from JP, Patricia Burnson from Dorchester, Marjorie Greville from Boston, Elena Saporta, address was not provided, Alma Ballon Rawson, Jamaica Plain, Sarah Fitzgerald from Dallas, Texas, Ian Toig from Boston, Beth Abelow from Jamaica Plain, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy here in Boston, Mary Harmon from Milton, Mass, Cynthia Williams from Somerville, Melissa Hamill from Jamaica Plain, and Phyllis Blum from Roslindale. So we have all of those on record and on file and have been shared with all the commissioners as they came in. With that, we'll go in order on our screen. So Luke, if we could start with Beefy, seems like he's the first person, a Beefy cousin.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I come to this conversation without no political agenda or nothing above, but I do come as a coach of the national champion Dorchester Elite Eagles, in which we are proud of the field that we are at right now, Roberts Playground, that the city of Boston, the Parks Department always keeps looking good for our kids. But I also want to talk about White Stadium as well. I just wish people would stop with the political agenda stuff and understand that when you do stuff like this, It makes the kids in our city want to stay in the schools. It doesn't want them, it makes them not want to go to MECO. It makes them not want to go to private schools. It makes kids want to stay in Boston. I've been coaching 28 years. I've been a little kid in these streets when we didn't even have parks how they look now. So I come to say this, that you guys are doing a great job. That White Stadium project, I've been bragging about it already to so many people, and people are very excited. And I say this, don't let nobody block this, because the same people that are trying to block it probably don't even go to our parks. But I know one thing, our kids in our communities, they're excited. We're excited as parents, coaches, and just City of Boston residents who we're not used to seeing beautiful things like this come about all the time. We got one life to live, and I want to see this happen in my lifetime. Thank you so much. Keep doing what y'all doing. Shout out to Mayor Wu and everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Cousin. Next on, Frederick Viederlein. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Hi, I'm Frederick Vetterline of Jamaica Plain. I live on Union Ave. I led a cleanup of the William Street gate of the parks 10 years ago, and I'm very involved in the park. I love what's happening, and I can only see it as an improvement when you bring more people into the park. I know a lot of naysayers say it'll cause damage, but I find just the opposite, that as people are invited to the park, they become more involved and see the benefits. I think that we haven't really had these activities that this White Stadium proposal are promising to bring. The last concession we had in the park was the refractory, which was run by the Burke family that ran Doyle's. And that ended in 1971. And I know many elder leaders of our community that worked there for the Burkes. And it was another connection for the park that we lost. We used to have stables until the 90s, horse stables. There were 2 stables in Jamaica Plain. And this is just an illustration of what activity brings to the park. It involves people. And I would also like to speak about the design. I find it's the latest rendition has gone from a stadium with boxy accessory buildings that were for the functions of athletics and for both the city and the soccer people. And it's evolved into this wonderful hand shape. Everything is in an ellipse that really echoes the designs of Olmsted, who made stone. Always he put his stone walls in curves that echoed the landscape and really the whole New England area. And I think the design has really gone quite far. And I also appreciate the park design. All the trees need pruning in the park. If you walk through, you'll see the overstory is just, there's a lot of dead limbs. And when those dead limbs are removed, that allows the growth of the planting of new trees.
Thank you, Mr. Vetterlein. Thank you. Just have to keep them to 2 minutes apiece. Thank you very much. Marty Glynn.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I'm just getting a message there from you. First, I'd like to say that I bet you every single person on this call would like to see White Stadium renovated. No one is opposing the renovation of White Stadium. The question is, what is it going to be used for? I'd like to note that the ownership is actually the George Robert White Trust. It is not the Boston Public Schools. The trust owns the property in fee simple, and that is an ownership that the court has agreed with. It's not separate from Franklin Park. It was built on parkland, and it's part of the park. One of the questions that never seems to come up is that the agreement with the city of Boston allows the team to hold private events. And private events can be concerts, they're large-scale events, at times when there are no games. And people talk about this as though, oh, it's just 20 days a year. And I would ask everyone to consider that these investors, who are very wealthy people, are putting in $50 million plus, now it says, on documents from the group, and that they're not going to see the stadium sit idle 335 days of the year, 345 days of the year, when there are no soccer games planned. So the question arises is what other activities are going to happen there in terms of concerts, large-scale events, conventions? I have no idea. When the soccer games are not being played. This is a stadium that is costing the taxpayers $50 million. There's a bond that's going to be issued to pay for this. And the current financial climate is tight and going to be tighter. So the question is this a good value for the money? And if you look at other stadiums that have been built for high school play, this can be done for far less than $50 million for the entire stadium.
Thank
So
you, Marty. Thank you very much. Going to Peter Fronholtz.
Thanks, Pete Fronholtz, Jamaica Plain, BPS parent. I've spent many a long hour watching soccer in White Stadium, and the place is a pit. The Playstead is a pit. Referees won't come to referee games in the Playstead anymore. It's really totally disrespectful for BPS staff to have to go to work in White Stadium. And it's high time, and it's great that the seal has finally been broken and progress is moving forward to, rehabilitating White Stadium. It's long overdue. It's great that progress is being made. There's so many, it seems like there's been a multiplier effect, with this proposal. I mean, there's been a lot of community engagement, a lot of response to community feedback, a lot of hard work done by the architects to really situate the stadium in the park. It's going to be, rough going with demolition and construction and everything for a while, but I think in the long run, this is going to create a healthier canopy, healthier trees, a more vibrant location. And I think with the $1 per ticket, that's $200,000 a year for the Franklin Park Action Plan. I mean, that's pretty substantial. So, I mean, I think the benefits here, and I echo what the coach said. I mean, I think the kids of BPS really will be highly motivated by this new proposal coming to fruition. And it'll serve the city and the public schools in Boston for decades to come. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you, Pete. Samira Mendez da Silva.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Samira Mendez da Silva. I am a rising junior at the John D. O'Brien, who plays multiple sports, including soccer, and I've been playing at the White Stadium for the past 3 years. And to say the conditions of the stadium is horrible. There's the field is lopsided, there's holes on the field, there's lumps. So I don't think the field is safe right now for students like myself and others who comes after me. So I do believe that the renovations are needed, and we do need the support from the commissioners to maintain a safe field for student athletes. And I just wanted to say I look forward to this renovation and to walk in a renovated stadium even after I graduate.
Thank you very much, Samira. Ann McKinnon.
Hello, thank you. I was kind of stunned to hear the legal counsel say that we had to write down some of these promises that have been stated. Obviously, these things need to be codified in writing. The BPDA's staff summary from July 18th stated that the proponent has committed to continue to further engage in ongoing public stakeholder engagement throughout the process. And given the commissioner's questions about transportation and some of the other questions about mitigation, I would request that the commission ask the proponent to share the draft transportation access plan agreement and the stadium usage agreement with the public before they're finalized. That would be a somewhat non-standard approach, but given the so-called commitment to transparency and further engagement, I think it's in order here. The transportation consultant says whatever it takes to get people to nod yes. And a lot of these things are just a fantasy that we need to make sure are in the access plan agreement. So I would ask that the commission ask the proponent to share those key documents with the public before they're finalized, so we can actually see what is in it and what has been dropped out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. John Kett.
John doesn't answer it, maybe because his hand has not been lowered from speaking earlier.
Okay, we'll go back in case John's in there. Thanks. Gert Thorne. Oh, you're on mute. I just want to make sure you're on mute. Can't hear you.
Good afternoon. I live in Jamaica Plain, and I appreciate you all paying attention to this project. I want to point out a few things which I think are important. As I understand it, you're not approving White Stadium renovation. You're approving a part of White Stadium. Now, usually in this current century, and I'm being sarcastic at this point in time, projects are approved in totality. A practice was called segmentation, took place in the 1970s, 80s, 90s on behalf of developers who wanted to share part of the project, but the whole project. Unless I misunderstand this completely, you're not looking at the whole project in terms of transportation, everything else. And that is inappropriate. It's not how the design world acts. It's usually how somebody wants to put something over on somebody else. Not suggesting it's happening here, but I suggest the commissioners understand it needs to be a total project, not a part of a project. Item number one. Number two, I really appreciate the notion of appointing an individual to be in charge of the park itself. I think other cities have done that for many years, and I would suggest you think seriously about somebody who's in charge of, for instance, the pond, Jamaica Pond. It's very large. There are problems there in terms of maintenance. Why not appoint someone in terms of each of the major portions of the city? Responsibility will sit in one person then, and it would help make things better, and it would be a point of contact for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gert. And just to clarify, so both the east and west side came through as a total project for this, so it's not a partial review. Today is the consideration of a vote for conceptual approval or demo, where a final approval with construction drawings, grading, all that further information would come later when those are in place. Today in front of us is just a conceptual approval and a demo approval. So just to clarify that, but it's for both sides. Jana Murray.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you to everyone. I really enjoyed seeing the plans for this project, and I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's not only architecturally beautiful, but I love that they're incorporating ways to make the trees better and enhance the natural beauty of this park. But my interest in this project runs a little bit deeper. I live in Jamaica Plain, just up the street. So it's really twofold. One is very personal. So we go to this park with my family. We go to the Franklin Park Zoo. The Boston Half Marathon ends here, so I'm always bringing friends and out-of-state family to this area. And that field does need some major revamping. But also on a holistic perspective, just making it more available to the community, more of a place to be. Like, everyone needs to create this more work-life balance, and I feel like this field creates a lot of potential for that. And I think this is deeply needed in all communities, and I think that this will definitely help Boston. And I just think it's a beautiful project, and I'm very excited to see where this goes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jana. Melissa Hamill.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you very much, commissioners, for letting me speak. I want to start off by saying that no one doesn't want this stadium renovated. Okay, this is a gem inside of a historic park that we need to have renovated for the school children in the community. Everyone is in agreement about that. What we're concerned about is how it's being done. This process has been rushed through at lightning speed. I have attended every single action plan meeting for Franklin Park. I've attended every single Zoom call for White Stadium. And every time I feel like the community is not being heard and this is being rushed through. We need more time. We deserve more time. There are alternatives to rebuilding White Stadium other than partnering with a for-profit entity. This has never been done before, a public parkland to be handed over to a private partnership. It's an unprecedented and dangerous path that we're going down here with public land. This was a park that was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted for the people, for the community. It wasn't designed to be used for a professional sports team ever. In fact, he designed Franklin Field alongside of Franklin Park as an alternative for games to be played. This was a respite for the working people of Boston, and it should remain so. This should be community driven with the interests of the school children and the community first and foremost. This plan has been rushed through. Every Zoom meeting I've attended has been 90% of it has been taken up with a glossy presentation, and I appreciate the designer's work on this. I know it's been a beautiful and hard job for them to do, but what we need is to have this design for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Sarah Freeman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to speak. I will say it's been frustrating at previous meetings, not Parks Commission, that public comments were not allowed before a vote. I did submit written comments, so I'm going to try to cover what I didn't already talk about. Mostly. Demolition is irreversible, and it seems premature to even consider it when there's a pending legal case. The prior statements last March that were quoted were from one person opinion, and there are a whole lot of people that don't see eye to eye on that. As others have said, the stadium certainly needs an upgrade, and the staff and students deserve better. It's concerning to me that the city doesn't take care of its buildings or parks. Many have commented that, oh, there'll be expanded use. Well, there could be expanded use with increased investment, and it raises really important issues ranging from what is the meaning of public land, public money? Does the city have an environmental justice commitment the way the state does? It concerns me that I'm not a plaintiff, but a whole lot of the plaintiffs are immediate neighbors, people of color, people in the EJ populations, and there has not been a whole lot of effort to reach out. Whoops, time's up. One last comment, if I may. I'm concerned by the statement that the group is meeting regularly with the Franklin Park Coalition. I think that means the board, and as a dedicated longtime member, I don't feel that I'm in the loop, and I would request that maybe some of those conversations be open to members as well as the board.
Thank you, Sarah.
Who works hard.
Thank you. Derek Christopher Evans.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Derek Evans. I'm a practicing historical preservationist. I'm a former Boston public school teacher, and I am a former Boston College civil rights history professor. And I also am a property owner and a neighbor of Franklin Park. I actually pay over $40,000 a year in real estate taxes to the city of Boston. So I too am a funder of this project should it go forward. I think I want to address Samira, who was the wonderfully well-spoken soccer player from, I think she said either the O'Brien or Madison Park. And she's absolutely right, as is everyone else who says that this stadium is in dire need of field repair, safety, certain upgrades that would make it suitable for a long time for its existing but unfulfilled and historic purpose, primary purpose, first purpose, which is to provide a sporting facility for students like her. What I want Samira and others to understand is that regardless of your enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm about the project that's on the table, the biggest and overarching fact that you hear alluded to but never fully explained is that on three sides of this park, going by US federal census data and census blocks, the highest possible percentiles of socially disadvantaged, vulnerable, inequitable households reside in Boston and the Commonwealth. In fact, if you look at the EJ maps that the state produces, and if you look at the EJ law that the state has passed in the last couple of years and upgraded just this year, and if you look at the corresponding maps and guidelines, you would realize that among all the other things, pro and con, that have been mentioned, there has been no environmental justice strategy, which actually means something that I'm sure that most of you, this is not to be disrespectful, do not know what that means. It means that there should be more, not less, more robust, more innovative, more creative, more community participatory for those people, none of whom I see on this Zoom call, none of whom, not very many, if any, I see on this or on previous Zoom calls with Landmarks Commission, BRA, City Hall, whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
And
Karen Moni Brodek.
Derek was muted rather abruptly there.
Yeah, it does it. I don't have control of the mute button. It does it after we cut in. You're on, Karen.
My name is Karen Moni Brodek. I'm president of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, and on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy works hard with hundreds of volunteers, contractors, and others to invest donated funds into the Emerald Necklace sweat equity. We've spent over $500,000 in Franklin Park trees over the last several years. It is really important, all the comments everyone's making about tree care. What I want to reiterate is, again, we are thrilled that the city has set aside $50 million for the renovation of White Stadium. It is incredibly disappointing that a conversation, and I think in many ways terrible, that a conversation did not occur with the public, as Derek and others are talking about, to review alternatives, to really have a community decision-making process to determine where and how investments should be made. The reason that these land use protections are so important is because things can change. Things do change, particularly when you are signing over rights to public land. And so that's why it is extra frustrating and concerning to hear, as many of you have heard today, the transportation plan is not done but will be, that the contracts and the agreements that need to be done will be, but they're not ready for any of you to see today. As the Parks Commission, I know you know the importance of preserving, protecting, and codifying the protections for public space, but what you're being asked to review today, and this project in its entirety, does not fit the premises that you set out in the Franklin Park Action Plan. It was about supporting the existing users of the park and doing that in combination and collaboration with the public, which is what we've been trying to do in our roles at cities and nonprofits in the last 30 years. in contrast to the way it used to be. And I'm really sorry that this project has been going in the way it used to be.
Thank you, Karen. Priscilla Andrade?
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can hear you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for your time and attention, and for the intention in the plan and the reflection in adapting the plan based on community feedback. Again, my name is Priscilla Andrade. I'm a Montebello resident, so I park abutter. Been a resident there for about 16 years. I'm also a BPS parent and a small business owner in Roslindale and Jamaica Plain. And I just wanted to, I put more cohesive content or comments in the chat, but I think the three things I wanted to highlight is a question about the city's design, and to echo the recommendation or request from community members to just see what is the alternative option. What would we lose in comparison to just the city's $50 million investment? If that's all we had to do, what Wade Stadium would we have to be able to make an informed decision? It does feel like it's this or nothing, and that makes it very difficult to feel bought into a decision and not sort of led to a decision or a certain perspective. Again, I appreciate the design. It's beautiful, as has been echoed here. No one is against the uplift of White Stadium and the need to support our students. I think another question is about the proportional time. We keep hearing this 20 games. And against 52 weeks, that doesn't sound like a lot, but we're talking about a very specific season, which is more like 30 to 34 weeks. So I have questions about that. The other unanswered question is transportation, and this is a huge deal. And I just want to take the last 20 seconds I have here to offer an example. The Puerto Rican Festival just occurred. I am Puerto Riqueña, so I was there celebrating, and I love the way the park is used in that instance, even though it is a lot of demand on the space. Upon trying to return home with a guest, we were rerouted. As you may or may not know, Montebello Road is a one-way road. And when I asked an officer how I could get back to my home, he asked me to go up the wrong one-way road. And so that's what we were forced to do. So I think when we talk about transportation plan, it's very great to have optimistic perspective about people's use of transportation. But I really like to know, how is Boston Unity Sports as the private party here, and the city as well, how are we invested in rerouting folks from driving and using their cars as the primary mode of transportation, seeing as even right now we have that same accessibility.
Thank you. Thanks, Priscilla. Louis Alicia? Elisa, sorry, Louis.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Louis Alicia. I'm president of the Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association, the largest EJ community association, the longest standing EJ community association that abuts the park. I represent a community that represents about 65% of its users on a regular basis. And I'm the founding member of the Franklin Park Coalition. I was one of 9 people who came together to deal with the issue of racism that engulfed Franklin Park in 1978. The racism was that the park was being neglected and being misused for everything from cars being abandoned to the city not giving its proper resources necessary to keep it up. We're back at that point. The reason I'm saying we're back at the point of environmental justice and racism, because the plans that's proposed do not take considerations the impact it'll have on the surrounding community. The simple decision that has been made by a group of people who weren't from the community to take the tennis courts that my daughters and my neighbors' children use to go into the park in the early mornings to practice tennis and move them almost a mile away from our community had nothing to do, had no concern or commitment to environmental justice or to the needs and concerns of our children. The idea that they would take the park and a portion of it now and give it to a private concern that will close it off during their activities and therefore minimize and mitigate the opportunities for the park to be enjoyed is the same issue of racism that we dealt with in 1978. And I don't have to tell you, Commissioner, that I've given not just 48 years, but I've given thousands of hours and thousands of dollars to make sure that this park works well on behalf of everyone. I think that you need to stop and consider what is being proposed and how that will impact the quality of life of the environmental justice community that's being impacted that's going to be affected by this. I urge you to take the time because you know my concerns, commitment is for this park in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Georgia Lee. It's breaking up a little, Georgia. It's hard to hear you. Georgia, are you there?
What the terms are and what those terms look like exactly. Thank you so much.
Georgia, do you want to just say a little more? It was hard to hear you. You cut in right halfway through, so we got half of the comment there. Or if you'd rather, you can type it in the chat and we'll codify it, everything in the chat as well. Is there any other new public comment? I'm not seeing any new hands raised. Are you seeing any new hands raised, Luke?
No new hands raised.
Okay.
The hands that are being raised are the ones who have previously commented.
Kaliga has not gone yet. Kaliga?
Hi, I am not even able to put myself on video or anything. I don't know if this was deliberate or what, but my hand had been raised and then it was unraised. So I don't know what happened. But at any rate, I was at the Puerto Rican Festival yesterday and I spoke to lots of people who didn't even know about this. And when they did not want that. Everybody wants White Stadium renovated for our kids. I have 3 grown kids that went to BPS schools. I have 2 in BPS high schools now. My son is playing soccer for Tech Boston, and he's in club soccer. We're a soccer family. I want a women's soccer team, as I always say, not in a park. 10,000 fans, if you should get that many, which is what you want, traipsing through the park is going to do irreparable damage to our green space. And for anybody who disingenuously said that this park is not being used, I am in my late 60s and I have been using it along with my neighborhood of Roxbury and people in Dorchester and Hyde Park and Mattapan and JP for all my life. If you go there, especially in good weather when they're going to be playing, it's being used by many people for exercise, recreation, and a lot of them happen to have brown skin. And what Derek Evans said is true. This is an environmental justice corridor. So people should have more say in what happens. And our voices are being silenced. All these people saying, oh, I like it, I like it. They're not from around here. They didn't grow up here, most of them. And these are not the voices of the hardworking people paying taxes in Boston, most of whom don't have the influence or the affluence to have much impact on this. But when I speak to them, they want White Stadium to be fixed for our kids. It's a trust for our BPS kids and for the community. And they want it fixed, but they also don't want a professional soccer team there. They don't.
Thank you, Kaliga. Dot Fennell's writing, she's had her hand raised, it said in the chat, but it's not raising. I don't know. Dot, are you able to speak?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you now.
Yeah, I want to say thanks for all the work that you put into the park. Really appreciate all the new staff folks who were really putting a lot of effort in to clean up the park. You're doing a lot. I appreciate that. I have been, as a former person just had said, not everybody who is in support might have been here, as long as she had been. I didn't grow up in Boston, but I've made it my home. I've been here for just about 20 years. We're raising 3 BPS kids who live next to the park. I'm looking forward to the renovations of the stadium. I think this is a really complex project, and I think it really does require a partner who's able to do not just the redevelopment of the stadium, but also the programming to give us a facility that is deserving of what our young people need. And I personally am really excited for a soccer team to be within the neighborhood. I think yesterday we were home all day during the Puerto Rican festival. And are there, some lessons that could have been learned about traffic? Yes, of course. But for the most part, things were moving in Parkside, and it got quiet by about 9:30. So, yes, it's an ongoing discussion. I've seen the design plans. I'm excited about those. I think that the city's been engaging. I look forward to continuing to engage in the process, and I look forward to hearing the vote. And just wanted to weigh in that, there are people who are actually very excited for the improvements that are coming to the park and partnering with a soccer franchise.
Thank you. Renee Stacy Welsh.
Hi, everyone. I've lived on Montebello Road for almost 50 years. I was born and raised here. That park, I learned how to walk, ride my bike, fly a kite. I'm also West Indian, so the West Indian Festival is where, the carnival runs through. Anyway, I do believe that the White Stadium does need to be renovated. I do think that not with a large soccer group that is going to take away 22 or more weekends of the best weekends of the year from the community, specifically the Black and Brown community. If you notice the developments that are happening now in our city, they have no green space. So where are people going to go but their park? So now you take away this park and you give it to a group of people that don't live here, would never live here, and you give it to them so they have the ability to make copious amounts of money on the Black and Brown community in the city is disgusting. And I think you know that. We do need our park renovated. $50 million can get it done without someone else. We don't need luxury boxes in the park that I can't afford to get. Luxury boxes, think about that. We don't need these things. Our park needs to be renovated. Our White Stadium needs to be renovated, but just not with this group. And we can do it differently. We can do it better than getting in bed with a group of people who are rich and will continue to be rich off of the generational wealth of the Black and Brown community. For the people who spoke in that agree with this, understand this. Your voice is not the only voice. You have to listen to everybody else. This park is supposed to bring people together. This administration is supposed to bring people together. And this park and this new city administration is dividing our communities. It's separating and putting people against each other. This is disgusting. Find another way. This is not it. And stop stepping down on the Black and Brown community and our generational wealth. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Renee. Robert, the music. Sorry, I don't know where the music. Robert Jenkins.
Yes, my name is Robert Jenkins. I am an IAG member. For those that don't know, that is the Independent Advisory Group member appointed by Mayor Wu. I am a staunch community activist. I'm president of the Madison Park Alumni Association. I officiate a number of sports, primarily high school sports. I used to live on Hutchings Street. My friends and I used to sneak into White Stadium when we were young. And then subsequently, I went there to watch high school football games and eventually scored the first ever touchdown in White Stadium for Madison Park. So White Stadium is near and dear to me. As Ryan Woods can attest, I'm a former administrator for Franklin Park and know the political landscape. We've been on countless meetings and hearing the concerns of all communities. And the IAG group is working with all the residents and all the city, state, and local officials. Yes, this is going to be a really monumental task to bring 10,000 people, meaning 200,000 people for those 20 games without parking at the stadium. And one of the things that I have been pushing for, as well as a lot of my members, more shuttle services to the park, because right now we only have Jackson Square and Forest Hills. That's not going to work because that is still a long walk from Green Street all the way up Green Street and Stony Brook. Those are long walks. And the thing is, if people know the history of Franklin Park, even going to Elma Lewis, people who live on Hutchins Street, who live on all those surrounding streets, do not walk to the park. They drive. Franklin Park is not like Central Park. It's not like the Boston Commons, where you have many entrances and subway, entrances to those parks.
Thank
People
you, Mr.
walk
Jenkins.
Excuse me,
Beth Abelo?
Hey, thank you. I'm a longtime Boston resident. I've lived very close to Franklin Park off of Glen Road. And I want to address, thinking about this transportation plan. As Mr. Jenkins just pointed out, there are many people that have to drive or get there in another way. And I'm not just concerned about the people coming to the games, but on a game day, during any weekend, there's lots of people from the surrounding communities that come to Franklin Park and they're coming with their families, they're coming with their children. Not everyone is able to just walk there because not everyone just lives right nearby. It's the surrounding communities, as Renee has pointed out, that maybe don't have backyards, that are using this park as their backyard. And when there's going to be parking restrictions to keep out people from the suburbs driving and parking here, it's also going to keep out all the neighbors and all the local residents that use the park. We haven't seen a good transportation plan, and basically, I think it's magical thinking to think we can get this many people in on all the weekends during spring, summer, and fall and still have room for the people and the public to use the park. And that's what I will say. So there really needs to be more engagement, and we need to figure out how to renovate the park for the public without for-profit entities.
Thank you, Beth. Is there any other new public comment? Not saying any new. I'm going to let Derek finish his thought there and give him the last statement before we turn it back to the commissioners. Derek?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. I do have to say, though, Ryan, that I believe that prior to your fairly recent signature on the document indicating that White Stadium was not the property of the Robert Trust White Fund or this whatever, but instead of the Boston Public Schools, no one in history that had ever, or no document in history that had ever indicated that. And it seemed to comport with the timing of the fast tracking of this project. Also, I should say that, Ryan, you and I know one another from the Franklin Park Improvement Project, which in many ways was a disimprovement. And after $9 million and a lot of promises and 2 years of a community planning process that I was actively a participant in, that project took a left turn after the planning phase was over to result in, and everyone knows this in and around Roxbury, that to produce outcomes that were never vetted, never discussed, never desired. And included, and I'll end with this, up to this day, after $9 million, there is still no installed fence, a safety fence, the length of Dale Street, or on Paulding Street for half of its length around this park, when there was before. So I think, having gone through that and having had to sue the city of Boston, including you, around that project, personally, as an individual, I am in a good place to understand that much of what's being touted here sounds great. I think it's a lot of sizzle, probably less steak. More importantly, I just think the process going forward has got to phenomenally improve over what's transpired to date. I was once said in a meeting like this, I think it was the Landmarks or one of them, it was poorly attended, even though thousands of neighbors and thousands of park users, tens of thousands, use the park annually. When you have a Zoom that's got 100 or less people and a third or a half of them are from the city or the investors, that's not community outreach. That's not community engagement. Being cut off after 2 minutes in the middle of a sentence is not good community engagement anywhere, much less in an EJ community, which this park is entirely surrounded by. So going forward, I would hope that something other than this becomes the norm. I'm not hopeful, but I think I would have to suggest it for the sake of everyone up here, for or against it. It doesn't matter. The process has been horrible. It's been fast tracked. It's not transparent. It's mostly cheerleading or cheerleading against and pie in the sky, wait to find out later stuff. And I don't think anybody can call this a legitimate civic engagement. Maybe during COVID, this was all we had, but now this is garbage.
Thanks, Derek. I appreciate it. With that, we're going back to the commissioners. After hearing the public comment, is there any other questions the commissioners want to ask or any motions? I know I'd also want some provisions put in place because I think we learned about the tree hearing still has to, or not tree hearing, a tree meeting for the new ordinance has to take place. So that I'd want it noted that with any vote that happens, that a public meeting in alignment with the city's tree ordinance that establishes protections for the tree canopy be held before any approvals are granted or the demo begins, and that our staff being the Parks Department would be able to review any updates on the demo and construction management plans to incorporate them in the CALA, which is the Construction Access License Agreement that would be required. And again, that this would have to go before the Parks Commission for final approval when those construction drawings are in place. But those are things that I'd like to be considered if a vote is considered today.
Commissioner, I'm wondering, is it possible for us to okay the conceptual plan, but not the demolition piece of this, along with what you just mentioned around tree planting? Is that possible?
The vote that's here is for a demo and a conceptual plan. So I think it goes forward. I mean, before they can start demo, there, like I said, that provision would have to be in there that there'd be there has to be the public tree meeting as required by the new City of Boston ordinance and things, and that any updates would have to be codified in a CALA. But I think what's before us is a vote for a demo and conceptual together.
Understood. Thank you.
Could I ask, how will if the first phase of work that we're actually being asked to vote on today is demolition, and we're also endorsing the conceptual design, if we're only endorsing a conceptual design, that infers that we have an opportunity to endorse a final design, and there'll be a later vote regarding that. In regard to the demolition itself, though, how is that going to be procured? And is there a demolition contract that's going to be let by the city? And will it demolish the 90 or 95% of the stadium that's not being retained, regardless of whether it's on the east side or the west side? Or what are the logistics of that going forward?
Sam or Diana or Dion, one do you want to take that?
Sorry, can you restate the question? The question was specifically whether this demo approval is for demo of the east and the west. Is that right?
Yeah, so what's the process moving forward that accomplishes the actual demolition and the timeline? And is it a procurement that is a single procurement and realizes the demolition of both the east and the west, whatever's not being retained and incorporated into the finished project?
So procurement between east and west is a separate process, including for demolition. I'm wondering if do we have someone from the east side team from PFD that would like to clarify that?
Sam,
The procurement.
I can
Yeah.
jump in here. Can y'all hear me?
Go
Okay.
for it.
Yeah, so apologize, but this is going to be sort of a broad answer, but I think it will
get at the concerns that I feel are being raised. It's important to note that the things that were mentioned before around the transportation access plan, the lease, and the other things that need to be codified will all need to be in place prior to any demolition occurring. So approval today does not guarantee that we still need a lease to codify everything to make sure that everything is buttoned up. And as Sam mentioned too, in terms of the contract and the operationalization of demolition, that still needs to be worked out. But obviously on the city side, we have a different procurement process than the partners would on their side, but it would all be coordinated and it would all have to be documented in a lease before we move forward. And we then, again, would need to come back before this body for a final approval of this project, as has been previously noted.
Thank you.
Dion, maybe I can ask you just to clarify. So, but
Elisa, I think you went out for a second. Are you still? Okay. Elisa, can you hear us? Okay, well, Elisa tries to get back up. Was there any of the other commissioners have questions?
Ryan, while we wait to hear from Elisa, Chief Irish, your statement confused me, frankly. You said there's still a lot that has to happen, that will happen before demolition takes place. My question to you, sir, is why are we being asked to vote today if there's going to be more agreements put into place prior to the demolition? Why is this not being put off just a little bit further?
I apologize if I caused any confusion. What I'm saying, I know I've heard questions raised throughout about the lease and these other documents. Those things are still being worked on. And so obviously we need this approval, but we will still be codifying everything else that has been raised and all the commitments that have been made before we move forward.
It sounded as if though you were suggesting that the transportation agreement would be codified and final prior to demolition taking place. Is that what you meant? Did I hear that correctly?
I'll defer. Sammy, if I could get you to just jump in to make sure that I'm not giving any misinformation around the sequencing of things, if you wouldn't mind.
I'm happy to jump in. You know, I think first on timing is the lease. Again, you know, I think the city is going to have issues about work on being underway without legal commitments and protections, things like insurance, indemnifications, risk, you know, allocation of risk. These are things that need to be sorted out before, you know, significant construction work gets underway. And so, you know, I think it's correct that ideally there's a lease in place before demolition commences. Now, that being said, the permitting has to happen in order for us to move forward with the project. And so there's a little bit of chicken and egg that happens with the lease agreement, meaning permit approvals need to be in place so that everyone feels comfortable actually entering into a transaction that results in a disposition of a leasehold interest to the team to actually carry out work pursuant to some of the permitting. And that applies to considerations on probably both sides of that. The TAPA is being done by the Boston Transportation Department. And so I don't know whether the TAPA actually will be in place or needs to be in place prior to the lease being in place. The way we're covering that, of course, is that the lease requires the TAPA, requires compliance with the TAPA, and any sort of default under the TAPA would become a cross default of the lease and vice versa. So the documents are integrated. The lease is really the key document that needs to be in place just from a risk allocation and risk management point of view, and also just to grant rights to actually do the work that needs to be done both primarily at the West Grandstand, but also at the East Grandstand. But so I would say on timing of the TAPA, it's not that that is definitely not going to be in place or needs to be in place, what have you, before demolition, but that timeline is sort of untethered from the demolition. The key document really is the lease, so that the appropriate rights and risk management allocations can be done before significant construction work gets underway.
So to further clarify, a vote today from this body will allow the city to continue to do the next steps leading to developing timelines for demo, as opposed to a vote today will lead to demo in the immediate, just to clarify?
Yeah, I mean, I think the votes today are needed in order to get the parties moving towards demolition, the process towards demolition. Remember, I mean, the city also has its own procurement processes that it needs to follow. And so advanced permitting, certainly with respect to aspects that the city is undertaking, are important because there's a more robust process when the city contracts with contractors versus when private parties contract with contractors. But I think, as a few people have noted, the actual final design plans and that approval will be the subject of a further meeting.
So there will be a number of key checkpoints after today.
Certainly, and I think Commissioner Woods also alluded to the fact that in any motion, he'd like to see that there be additional touch points, even just with park staff, as both designs and timelines and plans are being developed.
Yeah.
And provisions can be certainly added if somebody feels, more comfortable with provisions, whether it be around the lease or things of that nature. I know for me, I want to make sure that the tree meeting is held, that the Parks Department is still at the table and with the rights of the CALA, the Construction Access License Agreement, and the knowledge that this is not a final review. That final review comes with those construction drawings and plans that will have to come when they're ready, stamped and ready to be reviewed.
With that being said, I'd like to motion for approval with provisions.
Do we have a second? Okay, I will second it. So there is a motion for, I gotta read the language off of Carrie's thing here. A vote to approve the conceptual design and demo management plan for White Stadium as proposed by Boston Public Schools and Boston Unity Soccer Partners, which is cited at 450 Walnut Ave on assessing parcel 12034860001, which is separate from and surrounded by Franklin Park, which is located in the neighborhoods of Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Jamaica Plain, with provisions that Boston Parks staff gets to continue to review any necessary updates to the demolition and construction management plans and incorporate any changes to the construction access license, the CALA, that'll be required to go before any construction activity, that the tree meeting be held in as required by the new tree ordinance for tree removals on public land, and that the project returns to the Parks Commission for a final approval once the design has advanced to the level where BPRD feels that it's ready for final review. So with that in the second, we're going to do a roll call vote of the commissioners just to make sure we have it so we're not all speaking at the same time. So with that, I'll start. So Commissioner Woods, Ryan, I'm a yes. Commissioner Epperson?
I abstain.
Commissioner Pierre?
Yes.
Commissioner Quealy?
Nay. No.
Sorry, I'm going across the thing. Commissioner Bollinger?
I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Birdseye?
I'll abstain.
Commissioner Washington?
Yes.
Carrie, did I miss anybody on the count? Just I want to make sure the paperwork. Okay. So we got myself, we got Commissioner Birdseye, Commissioner Bollinger, Commissioner Epperson, Commissioner Pierre, Commissioner Quealy, Commissioner Washington. So my count is 2 yes, 3 abstentions, and 1 nay. Is that, Carrie, what you have as well?
I think Carrie needs help unmuting.
I can't unmute.
Carrie, we heard you there for a sec.
Okay. There were 7 commissioners. There were 3 abstains, 3 yeses, and 1 nay.
3 yeses, 3 abstains, and 1 nay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so the motion does not have quorum, correct? Does not have the votes needed to pass.
It did not receive a majority of the votes to pass, correct?
Ryan, if I may,
Yes.
can we go back to what Commissioner Quealy was suggesting? I personally would be much more comfortable providing a provisional approval on this concept design. Personally, what has me concerned is giving the authorization to proceed with demolition with so many unanswered questions and so many folks in the community still not yet in support of this project. And I'm hearing that there is a request for continued dialogue amongst the community. I cannot vote in the affirmative to demolish a structure with so much current opposition without some level of guarantee or understanding of what happens next should things not go according to plan. So that's where I'm hung up on. I can't say yes, demolish the structure without the guarantee that it's going to be rebuilt one way or another. So I don't know if there's a way to segment the vote to focus purely on the conceptual design to give the confidence to the team that they need to move forward and hold back on the final authorization to demolish until more pieces of the puzzle are put into place.
Do you want to make a motion?
So how do we want to phrase this? I would make a motion to approve the conceptual design as presented today, explicitly withholding the authorization for the demolition, requiring the Inspectional Services Department to not yet issue the permits for demolition until a subsequent vote by this commission. I'm sure somebody can phrase that a lot better than I can.
I'm just trying to write notes on it so I don't screw it up. Do you want to just try your best to mention again? I'm trying to scribble it. I know as you say it.
A conditional approval for the conceptual design as presented, not approval of the demolition. The commission's approval for the demolition necessary for inspectional services to issue that demolition permit will be conditional upon a subsequent presentation to the commission.
Do you have a second?
I will second that.
Second.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table for a conditional approval of conceptual demo. However, that for the conceptual plan, however, demo would have to come back before the commission after more questions are answered, and ISD should not give approval until it comes back to the commission. Do I have that correct? William, I just want to make sure
Yes, that works for me.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote on that as well. Get my list this time. Commissioner Birdseye,
I vote yes on this motion.
Commissioner Bollinger,
I vote yes.
Commissioner Epperson,
Yes.
Commissioner Pierre,
Yes.
Commissioner Quealy,
Yes.
Commissioner Washington,
Yes.
Commissioner Woods, yes. So the updated vote passes, and we'll look forward for future engagement and to have the demo back before the commission in a subsequent meeting. Thank you. Carrie, no other items on the agenda?
Correct.
Correct. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that. Thank you all for joining us for our July meeting. We will see you next month for the August meeting.
Thank you.